So what were the fortunes of the Upper Thames butterflies? This, as always, is a little bit anecdotal because every one of us is slightly biased by what we see ourselves. So I do hope that, although there is always a certain amount of disagreement about this and people think, well, I saw more than this or less than this, that most of you will agree with the broad statements. And the broad statement I'll begin with is that it wasn't a particularly good year. 2021 was not the best year recently in terms of the numbers of most butterflies. One or two butterflies probably did, one or two species probably did better than in 2020, but mostly I think they didn't. And that sort of borne out by, if you look at the top line here, 100,000, nearly 101,000 butterflies and moth records currently added to iRecord this year. But last year, the same date, there were more. Now that figure is slightly misleading because the records last year up to this date might have been added after this date, because there is no way, well, there probably is a way, but I didn't do it. What I've added is all the records from iRecord which have a date from the 1st of January till the 20th of October in 2020. So some of those might actually have been put in after the 20th of October in 2020. They might even have been added this year for last year. But it does show that this year there are fewer butterfly and moth records than there were last. But we're going to concentrate on the butterflies now. So the most numerous butterfly in the Upper Thames region in 2021 was the butterfly at the top left. By the way, I'm doing this so that it's a little bit interactive as opposed to just me talking. You've got to work out what the butterflies are. I will tell you, but I'll go through how they fared and then tell you what the species is so that you've had the chance to think about it before I tell you what each one is. So this species here, top left, was the most numerous in the Upper Thames region, and indeed, from reports I've seen all over the place, most numerous across the UK. So with 2,932 reports, and last reported, this is reports to iRecord, by the way, and the figure of the last report is taken from our Upper Thames branch sightings page. So this is small white, as you will know, because you can see a very small amount of black on the wingtips. Down at the bottom, possibly the second commonest butterfly in the region, vying with meadow brown, but nearly 2,000 reports of this species, which was last reported on the 6th of October, but could well be seen again before the year ends. This is with a large amount of black, the large white. And you'll notice that both of them are female because they've got 2 dots. Okay, what's happened to the numbers? So at the top right, with 674 reports, is a species where you will notice, because I'm sure you'll have all been listening to my various talks about identification, the first thing we look at to identify a blue butterfly is whether or not there are black veins going through the white margin. Here we see that there are, and then the hind wing there are not, and here there are none. There are 3 species with black veins through the margin on a blue butterfly. And the 3 species are chalk-hill blue, Adonis blue, and holly blue. And the holly blue, conveniently, the H corresponds with head height for where it flies, and half the wings have a black vein through the white margin. The 2 species which don't have any black veins are the common blue and the silver-studded. So here we have a species with black veins through half the wings, therefore holly blue. 674 reports, which is pretty good, but when you think that there were thousands of small and large whites, not in the same category, is it? And this one is either a common blue or a silver-studded because there are no black veins. And it was reported 1,433 times. And I can see that I've spelt 26 wrong, but that amazes me. I thought the common blue had a really poor season. I hardly saw it in any numbers anywhere, And quite a few places where I expected to see it, I didn't see it some weeks, although it was there at all the appropriate broods. Both broods were present. It was never present for very long. So I was very surprised about that, and I don't know whether the rest of you would be. I thought the common blue, this butterfly, very thin black lines around the edge of the blue, between the blue and the white border. The common blue, I thought, had a poor year. I was amazed that it had so many reports. But there we are, it did. And one person I was with this week told me that they'd seen lots, but that's possibly because they transect to Aston Rowant, which did have a good brood. Well, several good broods. Two more species. And how did they get on? Well, I thought that this year, the butterfly here, top left, did a bit better than it had done last year, up until the autumn, because last year in the autumn, the butterfly at the top left did really well, I thought. This year it didn't really. It was doing better in the summer, but then it didn't have a spectacular autumn brood. And the bottom butterfly on the right-hand side was sort of okay all year round. Sometimes it was more obvious than the common blue. The female of the common blue can be confused with it. So, top 333 reports of small copper, mostly, I suspect, in the summer, not the autumn or the spring. And then the brown argus at the bottom, which we can tell because there are black veins through the white border. And this black mark here, which can be obvious, is helpful. But just the overall smart appearance, the real contrast of the dark chocolate brown with the very white margins and these lovely orangey lunules, brown argus. 310 reports, so very nearly equally common, these two apparently. The butterfly here, I thought, did really well in the spring compared with recently, and that's perhaps borne out with 194 reports, obviously not on the same scale as the small copper and the brown argus, the common blue and the holly blue, but remember the grizzled skipper only has one brood and they have repeated broods. Last report, 13th of June, was quite late because it began early this year. By the way, I've gone for last reports because we so often feature first reports in things. I thought, let's go for last. So grizzled skipper, beautiful butterfly, and it did quite well this year. Another skipper, which is a spring flying, but also some years summer flying species. This year it did not fly in the summer in this area. There were very, very few reports of second brood of this species. Have you worked out what it is? So I haven't got the number of sightings here. That's a nuisance. Sorry, I've messed up. But anyway, the last report on the 14th of June, because it wasn't seen in the second brood, and this is dingy skipper. Oh, I have got the number. Beg your pardon. So 370. So it actually was about twice as common as the grizzled skipper, which is what I saw too. I did see more of them and in more places. Another skipper. Which one is this? This one's a bit tricky, isn't it? So this particular skipper was only seen 59 times, or only reported 59 times, with the last report on the 3rd of September, which gives you quite a clue because that's pretty late in the year. I think this butterfly had a really bad season, and I know that it apparently has vanished from Berkshire, which is really weird because it used to be that it was relatively common in Berkshire and just into South Oxfordshire, modern counties, and not in Bucks, but now it's much more prevalent in Bucks and seems to have gone from Berkshire. I hope that's not true. I hope people did see it there and just haven't reported it. So this is a silver spotted skipper. And this shows you where it was reported this year on iRecord. Those are the records. So as you see, the whole of this area, which is where it used to be seen, apparently a complete blank. Very strange. Okay, another white butterfly. This one, far less common than the thousands of reports of small white and large white. And this one, last seen, as you see there, and I can't see it because I've got something inviting me to stop sharing my screen on top of the the information, but this one is a wood white. And the wood white is doing a little bit better, I think, in North Bucks, but it may well be that Nick Board, whose name is up there anyway with the sighting, he's got a small team of people who are going out looking very hard for this butterfly. And it might just be improved effort in searching for it, but 28 reports is pretty good for this species in our area, and those are reports to iRecord, of course, so there may well be more reports to come in. That shows where the iRecord records have been logged, and you'll see 2 down in the south which are almost certainly wrong. In fact, I doubt whether the one that's over by Woodstock is correct, but it'd be lovely if it was. Here's another slightly tricky species, but you'll have spotted that the orange submarginal band has black dots in it, which is a good clue. 41 reports of this, which is more than the wood white, but not very many. And that's probably because the weather went dreadfully wrong when this butterfly was flying. Last reported 17th of July, first reported, I think, about the beginning of June, might have been very, very late May, but about the beginning of June. So this species, with its limited distribution and black dots in that orangey red margin, is black hair streak. Not a particularly good year for the species. It shows the distribution. And all those reports are very credible. In fact, what's odd is that there are such big gaps between them. The butterfly must surely be in those spots, and it needs someone to go out and find it. Then we come on to this species, which is another hair streak. And this one, 29 reports. And you can see it flew right into the late September, which it often does. So this species is, as you probably realize, the brown hair streak. And I think I might need to thank Dave Wilton for the picture. I'm not absolutely sure if he took that or if I did, but it's in my set of pictures now. So thank you, Dave, if it's yours. Brown hair streak doing reasonably well, and I'm very surprised at so few reports. Obviously, another butterfly that didn't have a particularly good season. It'll be interesting to see what the egg searches bring up in terms of distribution this year. Has been increasing, and it's still increasing, particularly in Herts, Middlesex and Kent, where the species has sort of recently been discovered, and therefore perhaps there's a bit more observer interest in searching it out. But we didn't get many reports of it this year, which is disturbing, considering how in recent years it's been doing better and better and better. That shows you the cluster similar to the black hair streak, but a little bit further southwest. Okay, another hair streak, 42 reports. And the last report on the 4th of August, so not such a late flying butterfly as the brown hair streak. I expect you've all worked out that because the orangey red submarginal band has a continuous black band inside it, that this is a white letter hair streak. And the white letter hair streak does seem to be doing slightly better year on year, but again, it might be increased observer effort, because we know that people have started to spot it and then they go back to see if they can find it again where they saw it the previous year. But excellent that it's flying around. It does have a longer flight period than the black, and therefore it should have been able to make something of the better weather in July, late July, which unfortunately the black hair streak missed because it had finished its flight period. And this shows how the white letter hair streak is probably in almost every 10k square. I think there's every chance it's in every 10k square, but it is a bit difficult to pin it down and find it. One more hair streak. This one shouldn't be too difficult for those of you that know the names of the hair streaks. And how many did we see? Quite a lot. Look, pretty good actually this year. I think it would be fair to say most people who went looking for it found it, and even at sites where the numbers are usually very low, it was seen. It was seen at 1 or 2 spots where it isn't normally. Didn't fly very long into the year. 15th of June, when the weather went wrong, is when it stopped flying. Now, one of our 2 fritillaries in this region, only 14 reports. That is incredibly disappointing. In 2020, the species appeared to have a bit of a resurgence, and it occurred at various sites where it hadn't been seen for quite a long time. So I fully expected it to have a better year this year, but no, afraid not. the last report, 3rd of September, is amazingly late. This butterfly doesn't normally fly after the last week of August, so that's about a week later than you'd expect. Anyway, this is a dark green fritillary, as you've probably worked out from the fact that it's got spots and not stripes. And the dark green fritillary would appear to be doing really badly for reasons I just cannot guess, because the food plant violet does appear to be equally common compared with the way it was 5 years ago. The butterfly had been increasing in numbers, but that's a very poor return for 2021. And now we've got far more reports. Look at this, 427 of our other fritillary. And this one, of course, as it's the only other one, is the silver washed. The last report in September is not a surprise. This butterfly regularly flies into September, has a longer flight period than the dark green. It does start slightly later, usually, but it goes on for longer, usually. And this is evidence, 427 reports, of just how widespread and relatively common this butterfly has become, which is amazing when you think that 20 years ago it was restricted to the Berkshire-Hampshire border, but now it's everywhere. Can't see the numbers for the top left butterfly. Let me try clicking once again. That's better. Okay, so here we have reasonable numbers of reports of these two species. I'm a bit worried about the top left, the white admiral. Its numbers seem to be holding their own, but it is very odd that it doesn't breed in more places. Honeysuckle seems to be fairly widespread, but the butterfly doesn't, honeysuckle being the caterpillar food plant. The white admiral not doing all that well. It was flying at a time when the weather was quite good this year, so perhaps more eggs have been laid in 2021, and 2022 will be a better year. Similarly, the flight period of the purple emperor down at the bottom was a lot better this year, so maybe it too will have laid more eggs. You might remember in 2020 it had a dreadful year, very few sightings, so 58 reports this year is up on last year, and with any luck at all, and assuming that forestry work where it does occur in woodlands doesn't take out the sallow that its caterpillars eat, and which unfortunately tends to grow along ride edges, and therefore is one of the first things to come out when woodland clearance starts. Assuming the sallows are still there next year, we might well see a much better year for the purple emperor. This species, one of the very hardest to find, not just because it's scarce and restricted to a few sites, but because of its wonderful camouflage. 46 reports. Now, personally, I think that's pretty good. I was amazed that we had so many reports of this species, which I'm hoping you've worked out is not a meadow brown, but a grayling. Last reported 29th of July, and that's about right. It is quite a long flight period for this butterfly, and in many counties further south, where they've got more extensive heathlands, it flies quite regularly into August. But in our area, it seems to be restricted to heathy woodland areas, and I think it would do better in slightly bigger, more open tracts. But it seems to be holding its own, which is good. It might even be showing slight signs of doing better in our area. Two blues. Now you'll remember my little bit of discourse at the beginning about veins, and I said there were 3 species which have black veins through the wings. They were the chalkhill, the Adonis, and the holly blue. So you've probably worked out, well, these do have black veins through. The holly blue is the one that only has half the wings with black veins through, and we can see that certainly this one has black veins all the way through. This one does too, but they're a bit more tricky to see because of some wear to the wing. So 347 reports of chalkhill blue. Last report, 26th of September. It usually flies right till the end of September, but you have to go looking very hard to find it at that time of year, when quite often it's just the very worn females that are flying. And down here we've got the brilliant Adonis blue, 117 reports, which is about average, I think, for recent years. Not a particularly good year for Adonis blue in our area. 1 or 2 sites had good numbers. Other sites where it's been seen recently, it was either in very small numbers or not seen at all, which is pretty much what we'd expect for a species expanding its range. Every now and again it manages to make a bit of a gain, and then it retracts slightly, and then it goes forward. So 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Chalkhill blue had the sort of season it's had very many years recently, where numbers were quite good at some sites for a while, but it didn't show any great signs of having huge populations the way it does, say, in Hampshire and in Northamptonshire. Never understood that. But it did appear at several new sites this year. Probably just males exploring, but with any luck, females were along with them. So Chalkhill Blue and Adonis Blue both doing about average, and I'm hoping that everyone who went looking for them found them, because they are absolutely beautiful. I'm just going to draw attention to the very broad black inner border and the pale color of this silvery blue or milky blue on the Chalkhill Blue's wing. Because in a minute, you'll need to compare that with the species we're seeing next. So this is a blue butterfly, for all that it doesn't look very blue. And this, not to give too much away, is a very tiny one. As you can see, the number of reports were down this year. It didn't do especially well. Last reported 11th of August, and Jerry did well to find one then, because that summer brood was absolutely appalling. The spring brood didn't go very well. It chose to fly. The butterfly was unlucky and flew. Don't think it chose. It was unlucky and flew at a time when the weather wasn't particularly good. I don't think it bred very well, and the summer brood, which can sometimes be really large, was tiny this year. So not a good year for the small blue. But this is our other blue butterfly. No black veins through the white margin, and a fairly wide black margin here, but a much deeper, darker blue color. So it's not a Chalkhill blue, and it's not a common blue, despite having no black veins. This is the silver studded, and you can perhaps see the tiny amount, if you squint and use your imagination, of silver studs on the underside. 228 reports. Now that might be the most for a large number of years. Unfortunately, it's not from so many sites as you might think, given the number of reports. It's a lot of reports from a few sites, but it is encouraging, because this butterfly had been doing really badly. So I'm really pleased that it was seen in such good numbers that 228 separate reports were made. Quite a few of them from the same site the same day. So we don't want to get too carried away, but that's still better than previous years. And that shows you where the silver-studded blue was reported. I think that the dot here, somewhere between Wallingford and Reading, is a bit suspicious, but you never know, just possible. Okay, one of our key butterflies of the area. I mean, I've been just looking at the key butterflies, as you probably realise. I didn't think people would be too interested in how the meadow brown and the ringlet got on. So I've stuck with the key species, and this one, such a lovely butterfly. 103 reports, which is pretty good. As you know, it's restricted to just 4, conceivably 5 colonies, depending on whether you consider one of the colonies to be in 2 separate places. And that's a good number of reports, but then lots of people go looking for the Duke of Burgundy. So it did quite well. It certainly appears to be spreading at the Ivinghoe colony, spreading slowly to the east. And I'm very hopeful, because we've just made contact with a lovely lady who owns a farm to the west of Ivinghoe. Sorry, beg your pardon. It's spreading slightly to the west, and we've made contact with a lady to the east of Ivinghoe, I meant to say, whose farm may well prove to be a good place for this butterfly to spread to in the west as well. Oh God, I keep getting it wrong. In the east as well. Sorry, I need someone to bang me on the head hard, and then I might be reset to being correct. So here's where we saw the butterfly, and we've got the records from the Berkshire, just on the edge of Oxfordshire, from the hard work of Ava, who went out and did a whole load of work for us. So she was doing a course at Oxford University where she was getting a certification in ecological survey, and she did loads of work for us over there and really did pin down quite where the butterfly is breeding, where the butterfly is in good numbers, and she also was able to tell us where there was good habitat, but apparently no butterfly, which was odd, because she was being very meticulous and recording habitat as well as butterflies. So we can follow up with that work in future years and see if we can get the butterfly to spread a bit, which it is doing just over the border in Wiltshire. So they've managed to find ways to get that butterfly to spread. I'm sure we can emulate their efforts. And I think this is my final slide about the fortunes of butterflies. I thought I'd just talk about two of our migrant species. The red admiral, I don't really consider to be a migrant species these days any more than the small white. Both of them, as you probably know, fly into the country in big numbers at times. So back to these two, which are definitely migrants in our county. In very mild winters, one of these two can manage to breed in the UK, but in tiny numbers. So everything that we see in our county definitely flew into the country in our three counties. So top, we've got Painted Lady. And there we go. Look, reported quite a lot of times, really, considering I think probably more than the average year. But on the other hand, the clouded yellow, poor thing, just 13 reports. And it really didn't do well this year. There were very few of them in the country and possibly fewer than usual in our three counties. Just one last point, which is to say, thanks to all the people who put their records in. If you didn't put yours into iRecord, they will eventually find their way to us because they all get amalgamated eventually. Anyone who hasn't sent in their records, please do. I know that Chris will probably repeat this when he speaks later on the finances, but Chris is very keen to get the paper records from people who do the churchyard surveys. So please do think about looking at, this is our Upper Thames branch website page, upperthamesbutterflies.org.uk. And this is the recording page, and it tells you where to send your records, not just butterflies, but moths as well. So please, if you've got any records you've not sent in yet, try to get that done before the end of October. Thanks very much. Right, how have I done for time? 10:30. Oh, blimey, I've managed to be 2 or 3 minutes ahead of time, which isn't bad. David, could I ask you, please, did we get any questions about any of those or any observations on it? Or perhaps people would like to put something into chat now?
Well, I think there were a few comments of people's experiences of the last season. I'm sure they could unmute themselves and repeat them if they like. But yeah, some interesting comments on what people were seeing or not seeing.
They've gone shy.
You should be able to see the chat as well, Nick. Well, everyone should be able
Yeah, I can if I pull it up. Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. We've got a small copper even later. Yep.
You mentioned one of the records you referred to was the purple hair streak, which mine was the last record, evidently.
Purple hair streak for Purple Emperor.
Purple Emperor.
Yep.
And that was quite local to where I live. And there's no colonies anywhere near here, so it was very encouraging to see that butterfly.
Absolutely, Pete. You're quite right that it does seem to be much more mobile in the landscape than we ever thought. Whether that's something to do with global warming or just that people didn't spot it in the past, I think that's very unlikely. People have always been fascinated by that butterfly. So I think something about recent temperature changes must have changed its behavior slightly and made it more mobile. I believe that's one of the theories about why the silver-spotted skipper is now in Buckinghamshire in such numbers, that warmer weather has allowed it to exploit a slight change in wing size so that it's become more mobile than it was. So when it had big wings and the weather was rubbish, it couldn't fly about much anyway. And Ben's just posted about the numbers of DGF, and he's absolutely right. They were numerous at Aston Rowant. I went there a couple of times. They were very good, but it does depend where you go. And that's why I was saying at the beginning of my talk, I'm sorry, it's a bit anecdotal because it does tend to, it tends to depends really where you go and which day you're there. Sometimes you can go to a site and see quite a lot, and somebody else goes 2 days later and there's very little. It is odd that, but it's a fact. So we all get a slightly different view of what's gone on. And that's why I recorded, why I showed the iRecord records, so we get a slightly fairer view, not just my opinion. Yep, most of that we've covered then, I think.